Good evening, and welcome back to our Parshat webcast. Tonight's class is dedicated in memory of Lipa ben David. His yahrzeit is today. Lipa ben David. This is the last.
Leonard Bidney.
Bidney. Lipa ben David Bidney, whose yahrzeit was on the 17th of Shvat, which was today. And we hope and pray that the schus of the Torah learned by so many will cause his neshama to have an aliyah.
Amen.
Amen.
This week's portion is a portion of Yisro. The portion of Yisro is maybe one of the most important portions of the whole Torah, because in it the Torah was given. The revelation at Mount Sinai happens, and God gives the Torah, the Ten Commandments, to the Jewish people, and the world would never be the same once God came down on Mount Sinai and spoke and revealed himself to the people. The world underwent a fundamental change. We spoke about this many times, that after the Torah was given, the world finally was given an opportunity to become a godly place, something that was unavailable to it prior to the Torah's giving. But let me just go through, first, as we always do, a quick synopsis of the portion. Beginning of the portion tells the story of Moshe's father-in-law and his wife and two children who come to join him and the Jewish people in the desert. So if you will remember, when Moshe was told by God at the burning bush to go to Egypt to redeem the Jewish people from there, he took his wife and kids. He took his wife and kids with him. But what happened was, when he came, his brother Aaron went out to greet him. So he asked him, "Who are these people?" So he told him, "This is my wife and this is my family, my wife and two kids." So he says, "And why did you bring them?" He says, "I brought them. I'm bringing them to where you bringing them?" He says, "To Egypt." So he says, "You must got to be kidding." He says, "We're trying to get everyone out of here, and you're bringing more in. We're having, we're dealing with a difficult situation. It's enough what we have here already, and you want to go and bring even more people to suffer." So what he did was, he sent them back to Midian. He sent them right back to Midian, and they went back to Midian. And for the next year, Moshe was alone in Egypt, working with Pharaoh to get the Jewish people out. The whole story of the 10 plagues. Now, finally, after the Exodus happened and the splitting of the sea happened, Yisro found out. He heard about all these great things, so he came to join. Yisro was Moshe's father-in-law. He was not Jewish, obviously. He was a priest in Midian, but he recognized the greatness of God, though he was an idol worshiper up to that point, but he gave it up. And he joined the Jewish people. He converted to become a Jew. And he brought Tzipporah, his daughter, Moshe's wife, and his grandsons with him to the desert to meet up with Moshe now, to join the Jewish people in their mission and their destiny. And the Torah tells us of a whole back and forth, greets them, and he prepares a meal for them, and the whole Jewish people honor Yisro. Imagine Moshe's father-in-law comes, so he received all the greatest honors. And then Yisro tells Moshe, he watches what's going on in the desert. He observes. In Yiddish they say, "A gast for a while, zetaf a mile." A guest for a moment, for a while, sees for a mile. That's the saying in Yiddish. A guest for a while sees a mile. Meaning you can live in a place you don't see. A person comes for 10 minutes, he sees what's going on. He has a better inclination as to what needs to be perfected from being there for one day. You can see what you don't see because you're living in it. he observes Moshe judging the people. What happened over there? Moshe was the leader, and you have 600,000 people, Jews 600,000 Jews. And Jews are not known to be for people that get along with each other too well. So a lot of problems, a lot of disputes, and a lot of din Torahs, and a lot of arguments and things that had to be resolved. So they would all come to Moshe. So Moshe, from morning to night, was resolving disputes. So his father-in-law sees this. He says, Moshe, you're going to be worn out. There's no way, you're not going to survive this. This is just going to get worse. You've got to put up a system. You have to have a hierarchy of people that can be judges of thousands, judges of hundreds, judges of 10. You set up a system where every 10 people has its own judge. And if they can't deal with it, there's a major judge for all 100 people, a bigger judge for 1,000. And then the biggest problems come to you, but delegate. Make it easy for yourself. God agreed, and they did that. And that's how we have the Jewish court system. It's thanks to Yisro.
Oh.
Yeah. You didn't know that?
Never knew that.
Yeah. 6 weeks after they leave Egypt, they finally arrive at Mount Sinai. On the first day of the Hebrew month of Sivan. And on the second, they rested for a day. And on the second day of Sivan, Moses goes up the mountain, and God begins the process of the giving of the Torah. He tells him that I'm going to choose the Jewish people. The second day of Sivan, he makes the Jewish people the chosen people. He tells Moshe to prepare them. On the third day he goes down. He says, would you like the Torah? And they say yes. He comes up and tells the news to God. And this went on for a few days. God tells Moshe, prepare them for 3 days, because on the third day I'm coming to give the Torah. And that is the 6th day of the Hebrew month of Sivan, that incredible day that changed the world. And indeed, on the 6th day, God descended onto Mount Sinai, and Moshe met him at the top. And Moshe went up to the mountain. God came down on the mountain, and he spoke to him the 10 commandments. The first 2 the Jewish people heard themselves. All the Jews heard. The others they did not. And the Medrash tells us the reason for this is because this was such to hear God directly was so overwhelming to them that their souls all expired. They had an out-of-body experience. They all died. And God had to revive them. And this happened again with the second commandment. Until the third one they said, to Moshe, this is too much for us. You go up to the mountain and get the rest and come back and tell us. Now we know you're legitimate. We heard God speaking to you, so we know you're real. And that's how it was for the rest of all the communication of God was through Moshe. It was not directly to the Jewish people beyond that, but the first 2 they did hear. And what were the first 2? The most important, the fundamental ones. I am God your Lord, the belief in God, and lo yeh lecha. You should not have any other idols. You shouldn't have any foreign gods. And we're told that the first one is the source of all the positive commandments. To believe in God is a positive mitzvah, which is the fundamental, the source mitzvah for all other 247. And the negative commandment, not to worship idols, is the root mitzvah for all other 364 negative commandments. So all mitzvahs are rooted in these 2. And he continues to tell them the 10 commandments, which are briefly, believe in God, not to worship idols, not to take God's name in vain, to observe and keep the Shabbos, to honor your mother and father, not to murder, not to commit adultery, not to bear false witness, not to steal, not to bear false witness, and not to covet. Not to be jealous. Those are the 10 commandments. In the end of the next portion of Mishpatim, he tells the rest of the story. Over there he says something very interesting. And I want to read it to you. I'm sorry, in the end of this portion. Here, it's right here in Yisro. I'm going to read to you a couple of words. A couple of verse. Or two verses. It's in Exodus chapter 20, verse 15 and 16. Now listen carefully to these words. All the people could see the sounds which God spoke. The torches, the sound of the shofar, and the smoking mountain. People saw and they trembled, and they withdrew backwards the full length of the camp. They jumped back, they kept retreating back further and further back. 12 miles, or 12 mil, which is, 12 mil is 12, a mil is 2,000, now it's about 3,000 feet. So it's about a kilometer. They moved back 12 kilometers. They said to Moshe, you speak to us, and we will listen. But do not let God speak to us lest we die. This is just too much for us. Now, in the verse prior to what I just read, to the 15, it doesn't say that they heard God speak to them. Let me read this again to you, because this is very interesting. All the people could see the sounds, the torches. They saw the sounds of God. The sound of the shofar. They saw the sound of the shofar. And the smoking mountain. So the rabbis tell us what happened over here was, because the question is, it doesn't make sense. The words of the Torah here don't make sense. It should say the people could see. It should say the people could hear the sounds. It says they could see the sounds. And this is a very interesting way to put it. So the rabbis tell us that this is, of course, not a mistake. That at that moment, the reyin es hanira, es hanishma, v'sheimin es hanira. The Jewish people saw that which is usually heard, and they heard that which is usually seen. A total reversal of normal reality. They heard the lightning, and they saw the thunder. Imagine that. Instead of hearing the thunder and seeing the lightning, they saw the thunder and heard the lightning. What does this mean? And obviously, when that happened, they all went Meshuggah. They told Moshe, "This is not. We can't deal with this. You know, this is not a normal human being can't deal with this." What does it even mean? What does it even mean? So briefly, what it means is, and some of you probably heard this concept before, this explanation. It's something that the Rebbe brings in a Sikha. He says as follows. He says in the human experience, we have both. We have the power of sight and the power of hearing. What is the difference between the power of sight and the power of hearing? I'll give you an example. If someone comes, if you were here tonight, you saw me here speaking now for an hour. If a man at the level of Professor Einstein, a scientist of world renown, would come in here in about an hour when I'm gone, and he would ask you all, was there a rabbi here giving a class here before? You'll all say, absolutely. He just finished. He just left. He may even still be outside. And this scientist will come in and tell you, it's not possible that there was a rabbi here in the left from 8:15 to 9:15. What do you mean it's not possible? We were here. And he'll give you a whole scientific explanation, and he'll bring out all his utensils to prove it, that the ear in this room cannot tolerate more than 11 people, and the conditions in the room, it's impossible that there was another person in there. It's just not possible. and he'll give you that greatest hour-long explanation scientifically, and they'll bring proof, will bring other scientists, and they'll all conclusively say that it was impossible that I was here between 8:15 and 9:15. What will you tell them? I'm sorry, Professor, but your explanations are all wonderful, but they're not right. He was here. We saw it with our own eyes. You can't convince us otherwise. It's impossible to convince you otherwise if you saw it. Right? Now we'll give you another scenario. We're all outside, and someone comes from in here to the outside and says, did you just see what went on in this room? There was a rabbi that gave a class to 10 people. Very nice. What did he speak about? He spoke about the portion, he spoke about some Tanya, he spoke about this, that, and the other. Very nice, okay. So, wish I was there. I'm sorry that I missed it. But then a minute later, a professor of the level of Professor Einstein, even less, comes to you and tells you, in this room, comes to us outside, and he tells them, this guy is not saying the truth. It's not possible that more than 10 people could be in here based on the conditions of the air and the oxygen, the whole thing. And he gives you a whole hour-long explanation. It's not possible that 11 people were in here at the same time, at this hour, because there's all kinds of things in there. Now you're already thrown into a little bit limbo. You don't know anymore. On the one hand, you have a credible guy telling you that he was, that the class went on. On the other hand, there's a professor proving to you that it's not possible that this thing happened. Now you're in doubt. Now you're not 100% sure that this class happened. Why you're not 100%? Why in the first case you are 100% sure? No matter what anyone tells you, it's conclusive that this happened. In the second case, not so. Because there's a very big difference between your eyes seeing something and your ears hearing secondhand. There's a very big difference. In the words of the rabbis, Ein nedei mishmiel l're'iyah. Hearing is not the same as seeing. You hear about something, or when you see it for your own eyes, it's two different things. When you see something, no one can turn you away and against it. That's why the Jewish people, by the way, never doubted the giving of the Torah, because they all saw it. They all were there. Nah, this chacham, that skeptic, this one, the rabbi, they can prove to you that the Torah was not written by one person, it was written by 80 different people, the language, the this. It's gehakt shining. We were there, we saw it. You know what I'm saying? It's like the professor telling you that I wasn't here now. You were there, you saw it. The Jewish people saw this. Now, we living on this earth, in the physical realm, we see and we hear. I gave you an hour ago a class on Tanya. What did I explain to you? That there's Atzilus, there's Bria, there's the world of emanation, the world of the 4 different spiritual worlds, and how God contracts himself and he lowers his life through all the different worlds. A whole explanation. Did you see Atzilus? Did you see Bria? You're hearing it from me. You trust me that I learned it and I can give it over to you. So, all right. In your mind, by some it settles a little better, by some people it's a little harder to grasp the concept, it's a little abstract, but okay, we understand what the rabbi is saying. It's something we hear, those stuff we only hear. They're abstract, they're spiritual in nature, they're in the otherworldly. So we hear about it. But this cup of Coke that's right in front of me, this I don't have to hear. This I know, this I see, I feel, I touch, it's here. I don't need to have a whole explanation that this is here right now. It's the stuff of the physical world I see and hear. I see. I don't have to hear about it. So we relate to the physical as absolute, to the spiritual as, okay, I hear that too. That may also be correct. That's the way we usually relate to the two worlds. The physical world we see, and the spiritual world we hear about. God, we hear about. The world of the world to come, we hear about. You know the famous saying, this famous complaint of Rabbi Yisroel Spalter, I think it was. You complained to God. He said, it's not fair. But you did. He said, all the physical pleasures you put right in front of our eyes. The world to come in the reward for Torah mitzvahs you put in a book. He said, you should have done the other way around. The physical pleasure, the Yetzer Hara, you should have put in a book. And the world to come, you should have put in the front of our eyes. It would have, would have been much more, you would have had a much more greater, better clientele, right? But that's not the way God did it. At Mount Sinai, something profound happened. The Jewish people were transported into another reality. For a moment, for a short period of time, it was reversed. Their attitude towards spirituality was so real, it was like something you saw. And the physical reality was like the opposite. Usually it's real and concrete and something we see. Over there, for that moment, it was the opposite. That was something they heard. Just like today. The physical we see, the spiritual we have to believe, and because, that was the way it was. If someone tells you tomorrow morning, let's go eat breakfast, you're going to have to think about it. You tell them, let me think about it, if it's good for my lungs, if it's good, I have to study the whole lot. I have to study how the digestive system works to see if the food goes in, if it's a good thing for me. I have to have a teacher tell me about breakfast food, what's the food made of, my stomach, if it works, if it's a good thing. You don't need any of that. You know that your stomach feels hungry, you go and eat. There's no question. You see it, it's real, it's concrete. But when someone tells you, you shouldn't work on Shabbos, and you shouldn't work and you should pay for tuition, and well, I'm not sure, spirituality is a whole different ballgame. At Mount Sinai, if you told a Jew, let's go eat breakfast, he'd say, well, let me go look, let's ask the professor, see if it's a good thing for me, I'm not sure. It's not, he wasn't sure about it. It's like today's spirituality. When you told a guy, let's go to sleep, he did, what's a bed? He doesn't know what you're talking about. You give him an explanation. A bed is something on four legs, and your body needs it when you get started. You have to give him an explanation because he was in heaven. The Jews were in heaven. To explain to them physical reality required more than just, let's go do it. Just like today, when our reality is just the opposite. You understand what happened over there? That's why it says they saw the sounds. It really happened that way. That which usually is a sound became reality and concrete. And that which is usually a concrete thing they see became something like something of a sound. You had to convince them that there's a physical world and the physical world is real. We don't have to convince ourselves that the physical world is real. We have to convince ourselves that the spiritual world is real. At Mount Sinai was the opposite. That the spiritual world is real, you didn't need to convince them. They saw it. It's the difference between the body and the soul. When the soul is up in heaven, does it want to come down here? Absolutely not. You have to explain it. It's okay for you. Don't worry. It's a good thing. And he looks down, he sees people eating and sleeping, doesn't understand what you want from him. How can I relate to that? That's how they felt at Mount Sinai. They saw that which is usually a thing of a sound. The spirituality became concrete, and the materiality became abstract. Just the opposite as it is now. And now let me tell you something on a different note. At Mount Sinai, there was two types of mitzvahs given. The positive mitzvahs and the negative mitzvahs. What are the positive mitzvahs and the negative mitzvahs? God basically laid out a plan for a human being and said, like a doctor, let's say, just to give an example. A doctor tells you, tells a mother the baby is born, the doctor examines the baby and says to the mother, listen, for this child to be healthy, you're going to feed it so-and-so, and he'll stay away from this and that and the other because it's going to make him harm, it's going to harm his body, and that's it. So the mother knows this is the positive stuff I got to do, the doctor told me to do to keep this baby healthy, and stay away from the negative stuff because that's going to harm the baby, and then you'll have a normal life. That's what God told us. You want to have a normal life? I created you. I know what's good for you. You can stay away from fire because it's going to burn you. You'll stay away from treif, from non-kosher food. You'll stay away from lying. You'll stay away from cheating. You'll stay away from idolatry. You'll stay away from adultery. You'll stay away from all the negative things. And then he tells you what to eat, what not, the things you need. That's a healthy life. Rabbis tell us an interesting thing, the Kabbalists tell us. That the neshama comes down to earth to work with the body. We learned it in Tanya before, right? So in the work with the body, there's two levels. This is the third, I'll tell you in a minute, the third, but there's two levels first. The two levels are the positive mitzvahs and the negative mitzvahs. It says that the neshama benefits from this descent as well. When the neshama comes down to earth, and it lives life here on earth, soul that is, and then it dies after 120 years, it goes back up, right? But it says that it reaches, as a result of it coming down, it reaches an even higher level of spirituality than it had before. So it gains out of the process. The question is, how does it gain? It gains from the physical world. So the example that's given is like a human being, yeah? A human being eats in order to live. What does it eat? It doesn't eat other human beings. Its own level. It eats things of a lower level. It eats flesh of the animal, it eats bread, it eats things that are lower than it. So the question the rabbis ask, why does a human being, in order to live, need to eat things that are lower than it? It should eat things that are higher than it, not lower than it. It should eat angels in order to live. Why is it eating animals or bread or the plants of the field? You should need plants of the field to live? That doesn't make any sense. So the rabbis answer that it's not living off the bread. It's living off the spark of godliness that's in the bread. But that doesn't help. You know why that doesn't answer the question? Because the human being also has a spark of godliness. So why does this human being can't live off his own spark of godliness? It needs for sustenance the spark of God that's in a lower level creation. So what does the Alter Rebbe answer? The answer that's given by the Mekubalim, by the Kabbalists and the Hasidic masters is that the life force, it goes like this. The lower something is in this physical world, that's a sign that its origin is from a higher space, from a higher place. Because the rule is that when something lowers, it falls. The higher it was, the lower it falls. Right? Just like if something falls from here to the floor, it's going to fall not so far from the table. If it falls from the roof, it'll fall further. Right? That's how it is. That's how it is in the physical world and the spiritual as well. The fact that this spark of God is in the bread, lower than in the human, it fell so low, is because in its origin it's even higher than the source of the human. And therefore, when a human eats, when the neshama eats the bread, and the spark of godliness that's in the bread, it ingests that spark of godliness, it's getting now a godliness that's even higher than its own godliness, because his origin is from here. The origin of the bread is from there. So when you eat the bread, you reach even higher. Right? Good explanation, right? The same thing is with the physical, with the mitzvahs. When you do a positive mitzvah, you're engaging something physical, a lulav, on Sukkot, a shofar on Rosh Hashanah, tefillin in the morning. You're taking something physical, you're making it into a mitzvah. You're making it into a vessel for godliness. You've elevated something for Hashem. That means that this physical being, this plant, this lulav, this this horn of a ram, and the leather that's made into tefillin, those things can be elevated and made godly. Those are the positive mitzvahs. How about the negative mitzvahs? God says, don't do this. How do you elevate the pig?
Don't do it.
By staying away from it. You can't elevate it. Why can't you elevate it? Because it's so low. It's so low, so you can't elevate it. But what do we just say? When something's so low, it means that its origin is even higher. That's why our rabbis say that by observing a negative commandment gets you in touch with God on a higher level than through the observance of a positive commandment. Did you know that?
Yeah.
You knew that. Mm-hmm. But now you know why.
Well, because you said that before.
The observance of a negative commandment brings you closer to Hashem, connects you to a higher level of Hashem than even the positive commandments. But now it takes me to another third level. When we talk about the negative commandments, give me 5 more minutes. The pig. Is the pig a reality? Sure.
Yeah.
It's a reality. Not only is it a reality, but sometimes you can even elevate the pig itself by engaging the pig. How? Anyone? You don't know.
By engaging the pig?
Yeah. Most of the time, to elevate the pig, to connect it to God, is by staying away from it. It's too low to really engage it and elevate it. But it's not that low. What's the proof? The proof is that sometimes you can even eat a pig. When? If you're in danger. If you have nothing else to eat, and if you don't eat it, you'll die. So when you're in a situation like that, where you mamish have nothing to eat, and if you don't eat it, you're going to die, it becomes a mitzvah to eat the pig. And then you have to make a blessing beforehand. I'm serious. Did you know that?
I knew that you were allowed to. But
you're not only allowed to, you have to. It's a mitzvah. Sure. If you're allowed to, then you're not allowed to benefit from without a bracha. That shows you that the pig is low, but it's not that low. It can still, in some circumstances, be elevated to Hashem. It didn't fall so low. It fell low, but not that low. There is a reality, and this is the puncher, the kicker. There is a reality that is even lower than the negatives, commandments. You know what that is? Tests.
Aye.
When God tests the Jewish people. What's a test? What is a test? Let's take Avram Avinu, yeah? Mm. The example that the rabbis give is that of Avram. He had a test to go, take his son, to offer him as a sacrifice, right? You remember the story of the binding of Isaac? Mm. God tells him one day to go and bring his son to the mountain in Jerusalem and to bring him as an offering to kill him, to Parshat kill his son, to slaughter his son. Next morning he wakes up early, he goes, he packs his stuff, and he goes. He's ready to take his son. His son is 37-year-old, he wasn't a 4-year-old. He takes him with him on a donkey, and they go. On the way, the Medrash tells us, appears suddenly out of nowhere a river. It blocks the way. They can't go to Jerusalem. There's a river blocking the way. What do you do? What happened to the Jews last week when there was a sea in front of them in Mount Sinai? God split the river. But over here, God wasn't providing such a miracle. So Avram didn't know what to do. He says, go back. God told me to go to Jerusalem to offer my son. So I have to go, right? So he decided he's going. He went into the water. He came to his neck. He told Hashem, listen, I'm going further because you told me to go further. If you want me to die in the water, I'll die again. That's it. I'm not going back. And he went 1 inch further, the water disappeared. It was as if it was never there. And why? What happened over here? The truth is that water was not there to begin with. It only appeared to be an obstacle to Avram. Its only appearance was to be an obstacle to Avram, to hold him back from doing what Hashem wanted him. So that was a test. The minute he overcame the test, he showed he's moving forward. It disappeared because it wasn't a real existence to begin with. Its only existence was there to hinder Avram's commitment to Hashem. He overcame it, it was gone. The Rebbe says in the Maimer that is the lowest. The test is the lowest. It's not a real existence. A pig is low, but it has a real existence. It too can become part of God's reality, either by refraining from eating it or by even incorporating it in certain circumstances, as we just said before. A test can never be elevated. Its whole existence is to see whether it's not about buy a pig. It's about the pig. It's not only about you. The pig needs elevation. Sometimes it can be elevated by direct engagement, sometimes only by refraining. But the pig is a reality that needs elevation. Every negative commandment is in the same category. It's elevated, let's say, for example, what you're not allowed to do, make money on Shabbos, or whatever. Things you're not allowed to do. All the things you're not allowed to do. So those are realities that the only way to elevate and connect it to Hashem is by a Jew refraining from it. But this pig is not here to test you. That's not why it's here. This pig is here because God created it. It wants elevation. And it hopes a Jew will elevate it by refraining or by engaging in certain circumstances. But the test, that river, for example, the river needs elevation. The river is not a real existence. Its whole existence is to hinder, to get in the way of God. Oh, that's low. That is the lowest you can fall. A creation whose whole existence is to stand in the way of a Jew getting closer to God. Could you imagine anything lower? Says the Rebbe in that Maimer, that when a Yid overcomes a test, that brings him the closest, that puts him in touch with the highest level of Hashem. Because if it's so low, it means it's so high. So there's three levels. There's the positive commands we got at Sinai, and the negative commands we got at Sinai. But one is higher than the lower. One is higher and one is lower. But and therefore through a positive command you get in touch with Hashem. Through a negative command you get in touch with an even higher level of Hashem. Because in that negative commandment there's a spark of godliness. But when godliness fell so low, when something falls so low, its whole existence is to stand in your way. That's all it's there for. It's not there to be elevated. It's there to be ignored. You see, the test is about you, not about the item that's testing you. It's not about the river. That river that appeared suddenly it's not about the river. The river needs to be elevated. The river doesn't need no elevation. It's not a real existence. Its whole existence is for you to be elevated through it. For you to overcome that test. And when you do, you're in touch with the highest level of Hashem. The ultimate highest level of Hashem. And I'll just end this by saying one point. A lot of people will say that for me, even the negative mitzvahs are all tests. For me, it's a major test not to eat pork. For me, it's a major test not to work on Shabbos. For me, it's a major test not to lie, and not to steal, and not to this, and not to that. For me, it's a major test. Right? But that's a sign of a person who's not healthy. That's not a normal situation. Let me give you an example. The doctor says to you when you're born, says to you about your child, don't feed it bad things, feed it only good things. Stay away from this and give it this. And 20 years later, this young man grows up and he says, the doctor told me not to eat this, but for me, I really want it. It's a major test. Every time I see this, it's a test not to do it. It's like a major test. What does that mean? It means this kid there's something wrong with him. If harmful foods, if he doesn't want to stay away from harmful foods on his own, it's a whole major struggle every time. It's like a test every time. Something wrong. The positive and the negative mitzvahs are not meant to be tests. Those are diets for healthy living. Stay away from harmful foods, harmful behaviors. Engage in healthy behavior. That's the positive and negative. Those are not tests. That's a normal person who will stay away from fire and pursue normal things, healthy things. So it's a person saying, but I want fire. I want to touch it. I want to jump into it. It's a test not to jump into fire. Sick man. A person that has a test not to eat pork, something's wrong already. That's not the way it should be. That's bad stuff for you. That's just the doctor telling you from the beginning of your life, this is going to make you healthy, this is going to make you sick. Stay away from the sick stuff. Don't eat chicken that's, raw chicken that stayed for 3 weeks out of a fridge. So no, it's a whole test. What do you mean it's a test? You're sick in your head. There's something wrong with you if it's a test. If God tells you stay away from pork, and he said, no, but it's a whole test. I want pork. Bist nicht gesund. You're not healthy. A test is something else. The real test is when God puts in front of you a reality that's not a real. Its whole existence is to make sure to hold you back and for you to overcome it.
So it's an obstacle?
Obstacles, yeah. Do you understand? Avram, that's a perfect example of a test. Something got in his way. And that happens to us all the time. You have a difficult boss that gets in our way, a difficult... all kinds of things that hinder us, that try to hold us back. These are all tests. Those are tests. And when you do overcome a test, the power of that is the greatest. The godliness that you achieve in that experience overpowers everything else. There's nothing greater, because if its whole existence is to oppose God, which means it's the lowest of the low, a pig's existence is not to oppose godliness. A pig is not there to oppose godliness. That river's whole existence was to oppose godliness. My God, how low you can fall. And if you can fall so low, it means that in your origin you're from the highest. So when you overcome the test, you got in touch with a spark of godliness that even higher than the negative commandments. It's the greatest connection to Hashem. The previous Rebbe said it succinctly. He said, the previous Rebbe also had a test, major test. In that whole story with communism. His whole struggle with maintaining Judaism in the communist era of the 20s and the 30s. Well, he was there in the 20s. They kicked him out, but those 10 years were misery. I mean, he almost killed him. He could have said, I'm not obligated to do this. He wasn't obligated. That was a test. And the Chassidim, the same thing. They were all tested. They overcame the test. The previous Rebbe said, I wouldn't pay all the money in the world down there. If you gave me all the money in the world, I wouldn't agree to undergo such torture, such a test. It's not worth it. But once I did it, if you tried to buy that merit for all the money in the world, I wouldn't sell it. Because as a result of that, he reached such a high level of godliness that the whole amount of money in the world, he wouldn't sell that level for all the money in the world. To buy it before the test, no one should look for tests. That's a terrible thing to look for, because it's not easy. Some tests are easier than others, but in general,
did.
Huh?
King David.
And look what happened. That's when you look for it. So that's what happened at Mount Sinai. God gave us positive mitzvahs, He gave us negative mitzvahs for us to connect to Hashem. The negative mitzvahs connect you to Hashem more than the positive mitzvahs. The higher level of Hashem. Next week we'll continue on this theme. We try. Have a good night, everyone, and a wonderful week.